Hello and welcome to the Trusted Podcast.
Guys, have we got a guest for you today? The UK's #1 sales trainer.
Mr. Common Sense Sales himself, none other than Andy Bounds.
Sit back, grab a cuppa and enjoy the content.
Andy Bounds, welcome to the Trusted Podcast.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Yeah, pleasure to have you on here. I think a lot of our viewers will be really interested in what you've got to say based off your experience. Just to kick things off, from one lad from the Northwest to somebody else who was kind of brought up in the Northwest, how's your upbringing influenced you into what you've done in terms of your career?
Well, massively, but I don't know if it's because of the Northwestness. I think it's more to do with my family. So we go in personal quickly here, Marcus. So my mum is blind. So when I was growing up, the person who taught me to speak can't see. So I naturally became interested in how best to explain things in a way that she would understand. So as a kid, I used to think it was unfair and mum was missing out. She never thought that, but I did. So I always worked really, really hard to see things from her point of view. Now, what is sales if it's not seeing things from someone else's point of view? And talking to, financial advisors who may be blind to why they should choose our products or blind to why they should give us the time. So yes, I'm very proud of being from the Northwest, but it's more to do with me mum, I think, which has got me into the job I'm doing now.
Brilliant. And so going back to the early stages, you started as an accountant originally. That was, of course, over the 90s. You've then developed into kind of the sales training aspect. How did you know you had the attributes initially to go into the sales training side of things, and what kind of led you down that path?
So I have only had 3 jobs, Will. So if you look at my hair, that's quite a long career. So job number 1 I was a chartered accountant. So I used to work for Grant Thornton and I loved it there. I had a great time. My colleagues were wonderful people. I will never write memoirs because nobody would read them. But if I did, I'd write a chapter about Grant Thornton. I loved them. I thought they were fab. My second job, the company where I trained to study my chartered accountancy exams at the time was called ATC. And I started working there. So that was at my second job. And so when I was there, I was teaching other accountants how to pass their exams. So I became a teacher of technical accounting stuff. And when I was at Grant Thornton, I was on a good thing. They used to have a partner trainee scheme and I was on that and it was all going very well. But then this job came up at the training company. And I remember talking to my dad and I said, I do love my life at Grant Thornton, but every time I'm at Grant Thornton, I'm often the person who ends up explaining stuff to clients, or they had an internal training centre and I did a secondment there. I just used to really love it. And I remember my dad saying, when you go to sleep at night, if you've balanced a set of accounts, does it give you the same buzz as if you've taught somebody something? And I went, no, that's where my buzz is. And he said, well, go to this job then, because I wasn't sure what to do. So my second job was this, and then, I started studying how people's brains receive information. So I had this natural passion and hopefully some skill from having a blind mum. But when I was helping people with their exams, I started studying how people's brains work, how they retain information. And I got better and better. And at the end, my pass rates were sort of 80-90% at a time when the national pass rate was 40%. So I was really seeing in real time that I was getting good at this stuff. And then I went to a sales presentation by a bank. If you're an accountant, you rock up to these things all the time. And I went to one and it was bilge. It was so boring. And I just didn't understand how someone could be so boring. They paid so much money to have this wonderful venue and it was just really boring. And then a week later, I went to another one and that was also boring. And I thought, oh, most of these things are boring. And so it was like this sort of... And so I suddenly realised I knew things that other people didn't, partly because of the studying I'd done, partly because of the blind mum, and partly because I was just passionate about it. So I went on my own. I thought I was going to do communication training, and I was very lucky to meet a guy called Drayton Bird, who is pretty much the guy who invented direct marketing. So if you ever watch Mad Men on telly, he's like the English version of that, like super successful. And he said, this communication stuff's good, but if I was you, I'd go in the sales world. And I'd never thought of it before. It was him who opened my eyes to it. And he said, to be blunt, they really need your help. And to be blunt, there's more budgets in the sales world than there are from helping people be more impressive when they speak. And so it just started from that, really. So it was all to do with my mum and teaching accountants and Drayton Bird. So it wasn't a plan. It was just, here we are.
Makes sense. I mean, that light bulb moment, I think, you probably go into your career not knowing where you're going to end up. And that light bulb moment, I mean, for Marcus and I, that was the same thing, when we were growing up, who wants to go into financial sales as a kid, but suddenly something clicks and you think, I'm all right at this. But you mentioned there about the bilge that you were seeing in the sales communications. What was it that bored you so much in those sessions?
Well, you can take your pick really, but two big things. The people, the bank, but you see this throughout the sales world anyway, they focused on two things. Number one, they focused on themselves, and number two, they focused on their past. So the first slide was said to be like, we were founded in 1793, and then there was a map of their offices, and then it listed all the products that they had. They even had a black and white photo of the founder or something stupid. I just couldn't understand. And I just thought, why are you talking about yourself in your past? The only thing your audience wants to hear is about themselves and their future. So it's like if you're a lawyer and you're doing some sale, don't talk about the fact you've won a legal award and you've been doing it for 20 years. Instead, focus on the fact that in the future, you can keep me out of jail. So I don't want the lawyer. What I want is after the lawyer, I'm not going to jail. I don't want the fancy financial products. I want to retire at 56 with more money in my pocket than I was going to have. So nobody wants the thing, they want the afters of the thing. And you think when people talk about mortgages, they talk about wrappers and flippers and I just want to buy the house. And so what I found is the two biggest problems that most salespeople do is they talk about themselves too much and they talk about the past too much. And anyone listening to this, if your company has a sales deck, look at the first 2 or 3 slides. Are they called About Us? Does it have a map of your offices? Does it talk about the year you were founded? Does it talk about how many products you've got? Does it tell me how customer-centric you are? I probably think you're not if you're not talking about the customer. And that's the main two things. People talk about the wrong person and the wrong time zone.
That's really interesting, Andy. Kind of elevating that again, you took the plunge thereafter to go into keynote speaking. How did you kind of know when you had the confidence in yourself to move from kind of training probably in a small environment to going and standing on stage, speaking in front of vast numbers of people? Did that opportunity present itself to you? Did you create that for yourself? How did that come around?
It's interesting that, I've always had a bit of drive, but basically if you do training, you tend to speak to not very many people for quite a long time. So you might have 10 people for a day. Whereas if you do conference speaking, you have loads and loads of people, but not very long. So you might have 1,000 people for 20 minutes. Yeah. And so it wasn't a natural thing. It's slightly different, really. But the main thing is that I was training a group of 10 people, because it sounds like I've been really lucky without any planning. I was training, say, 10 people, and then someone said, oh, that went really well. Would you mind training my group? We've got 20. And I said, well, we'll give it a go. I'll see. And that worked fine. And then someone else had a group of 50. And then someone else had a group of 200. And I really had to put my big boy pants on then, because that was quite scary. And then I did the 200. And a lot of people who do what I do, they're quite extrovert. They like being on stage. And I'm not saying it's all look at me. They just have a real buzz from it. I'm more introvert, though it sounds a bit strange. It just is an efficient way to use me. You could do so much good if you can speak to 1,000 people for half an hour. That's a much better use of me. It just seems a more efficient use of the asset, if you like, for want of a better word. And so it wasn't that I was driven to being on stage. I'm just driven to bringing value to my clients, and that seemed to be the best way to do it. After I'd spoken to 200, there used to be an organisation, ISMM, the Institute of Sales and Marketing Management, and they used to have the biggest sales conference in the country, and they used to have 1,500, 2,000 people there. And someone saw me at a regional event, and they said, we want you on main stage. And if anything, Marcus, it just felt a bit soon for me, because I'd done 200, but I was going from 200 to 2,000. And then it suddenly dawned on me that when you speak to audiences, if you speak to audiences of anything up to 10, 15, 20, it's quite intimate. But when you get to 21, nobody says anything to you anyway. It's more of a show. So the difference between 21 and 2,000 is actually not that. You have to get your head around it, but no one's going to talk to me if it's 21 or 2,000. So once I realised that it was just the same thing, there was just more lights in my face, I sort of managed to settle myself down and it was fine. So it wasn't part of the plan. It just ended up that way.
Brilliant. I think similarly with myself and Will, sometimes opportunities present themselves in front of you. You've just got to grab them. Even if you don't think you're at that level now, you'll always do everything in your power to get yourself there.
Yeah, I'm always interested in what's the right level of ambition, actually. I think ambition is good. It gives you drive. If you're overly ambitious, like ambition means you want the future to be better than the present, yeah? And that's good. That's what ambition means. But if you're not careful, you never enjoy the present because you're always striving for the next thing. So I've always been, I want to passionately love what I'm doing, and I don't want to, but I want enough drive that I want to improve. And I'm always amazed how stupid I was 2 weeks ago, right? Because you always get better. But I really like this feeling of, I don't want absolute ambition, and I don't want absolutely to settle either. You know, I just love what I do, but it's nice if you think, how can I bring even more value to even more people? And that's a good thing to want, right?
Yeah, we have this conversation all the time. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is when I first started, it was, you know, this job is going to be successful if you work hard. Then it was a little bit later down. It's well, you've got to tie in organisation. And then actually, the later down the line I've got, the more I've realised that it's got to be sustainable. You know, you've got to enjoy what you're doing. It's the same as a diet for me. You know, if it's crap and you do 1 month of it and then by the 1st of Feb you're back into eating chips and drinking wine again, you know, it doesn't have that same sustainability aspect. And that's where kind of the efficiency comes in that you mentioned earlier about how do you get your voice to such a wide audience. A big part of what we look at is how do you spend your time in a sales role. You know, we get a lot of inbound stuff, but prospecting is absolutely essential to the sustainability of our role. So how do you see prospecting playing a role, and how do you run a successful prospecting campaign in today's competitive market?
Okay, so with prospecting, there are at least 2, maybe 3 things you've got to do. Right. Firstly, you have to use the best prospecting tool for you, whatever that is. What a lot of people do is they look at what everybody else does and then they copy that. And that's sort of a good idea, but the downside of that is you only copy the visible stuff. So if people looked at me, they will think, oh, if I want to do that, do I have to write books? Do I have to post something on LinkedIn all the time? No, that's just the visible stuff I do. Most of my prospecting nobody sees because it's all me talking to me mate saying, can I help you this year? Yeah. So the first thing you have to do, Will, is work out what's going to work best for you. I call this prioritize. Like, of all the things you do, prioritize what works best for you. And what I'm looking for is 2 things beginning with S: sales and speed. So I want something that's most likely to work quickly. So for me and my business, cold calling is a no-no because it doesn't often work and it's not very speedy. And actually, there's another S, smiling. I hate it anyway. So posting loads of stuff on LinkedIn might result to some sales. It's not that speedy. I quite like it. It's quite smiling. Writing a book, yeah, that's been good. It's not speedy. It took 6 months. Did I enjoy it? Sometimes. It's nice seeing it on the shelf in Smith's. And so you go through all these things. So the first thing is work out what's going to work for you. In my experience, the thing that works best is warm beats cold. So speak to people who know you rather than strangers. So last year, for example, my diary was totally empty, and it was deliberately so. I had a hip replacement operation. So I said to all my customers, leave me alone for 2 months because that's how long I'm going to take recovering. And then for some reason, don't know why, because I'm really unhealthy, after 1 month I was totally better. So I came back to work, but month 2 my diary was totally empty. So I had to go back to prospecting land. So what I did was I thought, okay, so I'm not going to go talking to strangers because that's not very easy. So I emailed every single person who bought from me the year before. And then the year before that, everyone who bought like the biggest 50% of my contract. So I went for everyone in the previous year and the big ones from the year before. And I sent them all this note with the word new in it. So I said, hey, you've had a good Christmas, blah, 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 blah. And then I said, well, I've been off with me hip. I've been looking around and there's a couple of new things going on in the sales world. If you got 10 minutes, let me know and we can schedule a call. And of all those emails I sent, admittedly to people who I think like me and I like them, 83% of people replied to go, yeah, go on then. So I went from having an empty diary to a full diary because I sent an email out to me mates. Now, what most people would have done, they would have seen an empty diary and got on the phone or sent an email and wondered why nobody was coming round or gone to some Chamber of Commerce thing. I love Chamber of Commerce, but it's not the best way to get new leads sometimes. So the first thing you have to do is prioritise. That's the first thing, Will. Think outside the box. Don't just copy what everyone else does. Probably speak to your existing mates. Secondly, prioritise, diarise. This is really important with prospecting. It's boring, but you've got to do it. You have to schedule time in your Outlook calendar to do it. People often say at the end of the week to me, I didn't have time to prospect. And they say the word time as though, it's not my fault, it's time's fault. If there was 25 hours in the day, I would have done it. No, you wouldn't. No, it's nothing to do with time. It's to do with what goes in your diary. So I have some time set aside in my diary, 2 or 3 little slots every week. And every time it comes up, I then do me referral requests or I do my contacting my existing customers and saying, how else can I help you, and so on. The final word beginning with I, so it's a bit of a ranty answer. So prioritise your best techniques, diarise, put it in your diary. And the third thing is socialise. Share with someone else what you're doing and ask them to hold you to account. Because if something comes up in your diary and you can't be bothered one day because it's February and you're on the chips and the wine, I think you said, well, so you've already had chips and wine and then a reminder comes up saying do some cold calling, you're going to press dismiss, aren't you? But if Marcus is going to check up with you every Friday and say, have you done it? Have you done it? Have you done it? Then you begin to look stupid if you haven't done it. And Marcus can take your excuses if you want, or he can just say, well, you said you were going to do it. Well, I don't care that you didn't have time. You said you were going to do it. You could even go like the parent, Marcus, go, we're not angry, we're just disappointed. You've not just let me down, you've let yourself down. So prioritise, diarise, socialise is my quick answer to that question. And anyone listening to this, if you're missing any of those three, then your prospecting won't be as good as it could be.
Well, you perfectly kind of outlined the strategy there, Andy. Are there any kind of mistakes that you see sales professionals make when they are getting into that contacting stage? They might have outlined the prospects, who they're going to go after, in terms of kind of what communication methods, the way they position things. What do you see there?
Well, it sort of a bit goes back to that bank bilge I was talking about before. What a lot of people do is they talk about themselves and their past too much. So imagine if I didn't know you and out of the blue you have an email from me, it's called meeting request. And it says something like, hello there, Marcus. My name is Andy, and I work for an international sales consultancy and training outfit. We work with some of the largest companies in the world. Over the last 20 years, I've been fortunate enough to write 3 books, and they've all been bestsellers. One of them was only kept off the Amazon. And as you're reading this, you're thinking, shut up! I'm not talking about you at all. I mean, this is clearly a cut and paste email I've sent to millions of people. Instead, I could send you a little personalised note, and it says, hi, Marcus. Nice to meet you. I saw on LinkedIn last week you posted something called I Hate Everyone. You were clearly in a bad mood, Marcus. It resonated with me because I hate everyone too. I'd love to give you a quick call and share experiences about this and brief you on some of the stuff I'm seeing. I'll give you a call tomorrow. Bye. Now you're more likely to do it because I've gone on your thing. You talked about this. Well, I'm interested in this as well. I'll call you tomorrow. That's the way to do it, but people don't do that. So it's like you email me out of the blue, call it meeting request and say, hi, my name is Marcus, I've been doing this for 10 years. I just think, shut up. So that's the main mistake. They just talk about themselves too much.
Personalisation and humanisation of the contact is what we're saying there then.
Yeah, and just don't talk about yourself. I mean, it's one of these that, much as I like to think people buy from me because of my searing insights, they don't. They buy from me because when they finish, those words beginning with S up and they make more sales with more speed and more smiling. Yeah, that's the only reason people buy me. In fact, no one's ever bought from me, or no one, has ever made any sales whatsoever when they're sat there on one of my sales conference keynotes because they're sat there listening to me. So they don't care what I say. They care what their sales happen when I shut up. So no one wants me, they want the afters, what I call the afters of me, why people are better off after me. So as long as every person remembers, nobody wants you, they want why they're better off after you. So after the lawyer, I'm not going to jail. Like Will, you're talking about losing a bit of weight. So when you see a personal trainer, you don't want the personal trainer, but after seeing her, you're not going to be as fat anymore. Not that you are fat, you know what I mean. Yeah, so nobody wants the thing, they want the afters of the thing. The problem people do, Marcus, is they just talk about themselves too much.
Makes sense. I mean, storytelling, I think, is one of those things where people lack a little bit of imagination at times, and I think that your story with the bank is very similar to financial advice. It's so heavily regulated. We've got to think about the vulnerability of the end client at all times, and therefore I think people end up coming away from the storytelling aspect. Whereas I think as what we've always been taught is how do we help that person at the end of the use of our product retire with confidence? How do we help them meet their goals? How do we help we get that person onto the beach? From my point of view, it's always interesting to hear how other people have that effective storytelling. What are your top tips for storytelling?
So my top tips for storytelling are 2 things, really, and both of them have the word afters in them. Sorry, you'll hear me say the word afters a lot. So customers want why they're better off after you. The point I said, so after the personal trainer, we're not as fat. Okay, so people want the afters. So the first thing is find the afters that the other person wants. So don't talk about your story yet. You find the afters they want. So let's say you're talking to me, and you ask a few questions and you find that I want to retire at the age of 57 and I want, let's use a number, £10 million in my bank, let's say. That's what I want. So 57 and 10 million. That's what I want. They're the afters. So first thing about telling stories is don't tell stories first. So find the afters I want. Then, secondly, now you tell the story, but what you do is you tell the story in a way which evidences the afters. So you say something like this. So what I'm hearing from you is this, Andy. You want to retire at the age of 57 and you want assets of 10 million. Have I got that right? And I go, yeah, that's right. And then you say your story. You sound exactly like one of my other customers. They said exactly the same thing to me 10 years ago, and they actually retired at 56, and they had more than £10 million assets when we did that. Do you mind if I share with you what I shared with them, Andy? I think it might help you. Now I'm all over it, right? Because now you're talking my language. So what's happening there is, rule number one, find the afters the person wants. So like, what are your goals? Like, what do you want to achieve? What do you want for your family? Talk about your retirement. Which of your mates has retired really well? Do you want a retirement like that? All this stuff. Find out where they want to be. And then you say, we can help you with that. We've done it before. In fact, one of my customers, and did you notice when I told the story, Will, I went straight to the afters. One of my customers retired at 56. Yeah, so I might say to my clients, so if somebody says they want to win a big deal or something and they've got a big pitch they need to win it, I can say, you sound like one of my clients, one of the major banks. I helped them win a deal worth £2.5 billion. And we found there was 5 things they needed that helped them differentiate themselves from the other banks involved. Do you mind if I tell you what they were? I think it might help. So the way I tell the story is the beginning and the end. Like, it was this bank and they won £2.5 billion. Would you like to hear how?
We've gone through our prospecting strategy, Andy. We've gone through some of the common pitfalls of how, in terms of communication. We've gone through the storytelling process as well. Not every client is going to sign up with us. How do we overcome objection handling with those clients without being too pushy as well as part of it?
Yeah, that's really important what you said there about not being too pushy. I'm a little bit of a coward with these things. If I think something might cause offence, I just don't do it. There's plenty of people in the world who might want me. If somebody doesn't, I'm not going to try and hold them down. I hate that. I hate it so much. Sometimes I feel when I'm talking to salespeople, God, you like the sale more than you like me. You know, you just don't seem to care about me at all. You just want my money, and I hate that. So as long as you're behaving appropriately, the 2 words that you need to remember when you're doing objections is scripts and practice. So scripts, you have to have some idea what you're going to say. So if you're having a chat with me in Starbucks and I say, this all sounds fine, Marcus, but I think your organisation's a bit big for little old me. If you don't know how to do it, if you haven't got some idea of the script, what the words you're going to say, you're going to open your mouth and say, no, don't be wrong, Anne, that's wrong, that's stupid, that's wrong, because you don't know what to say. So you have to have some idea the words that are going to come out of your mouth. Now, I use the word script for that. Some people say guidance or gut feel, but you have to have some idea of the words you're going to say. That's really important, because the word something's going to come out of your mouth. It might as well be good. Well, the right words might not come out in the middle of a stressful sales conversation, so script it. And the other one is practice. Objections are verbal things, so you should practice it verbally. So I mentioned before about mum being blind. I'm blind in the left eye. I've got very bad eyesight. I can't see far enough to drive, so I don't know how you drivers do it. But my understanding is when people learn to drive, they don't just read a highway code and think, that'll be fine. And also, they don't go on the motorway first. What they do is they go in Asda car park and just pootle around and make sure. So they practice the real thing in a safe environment. So objection handling, what you do is work out what your script is, and I'll give you some example scripts if you want, Marcus. Work out what your script is, and then you practice it verbally at least 10 times. Right? I say 10 because I don't want to traumatise anyone. I'm 20 or 30. I'm really good at objection handling. I wasn't born that way. It's just because I've practiced and practiced and practiced. So I know if someone comes in and says, that sounds a bit expensive, I've got my script. If somebody says we can't afford it, I've got my script. If someone says training would deflect us from our key strategy now, I know what to say. If someone says we already work with a sales trainer, I know what to say. Now, do I always win the sale, Marcus? No, of course I don't. But I know how to respond. I'm really good at it because I've done all my practice. And I'm always appropriate. If it looks like I'm not the right person, I'll say, do you know what? Listening to this, I don't think we're going to be the right partners for each other here. So I'm not saying I'm not worthy of you or I just don't think we're going to be the right partners. So I'm always looking to qualify out if I don't feel it's quite right. So script, practice, and don't be an idiot.
It'd be great to have a quick snippet of a script, Andy. I'm sure our viewers would find that of tremendous value.
Okay, cool. So let's do... Let's say someone rings up and they start talking about price a bit too early. Now, I like talking about price, but not early. I want everyone to hear my afters to start with. So by the time we finish, you might make sales of 2.5 billion or whatever. What's my price for delivering that? So actually, that was quite a good one. So with that bank where I helped them win the deal, because they'd already told me it's worth $2.5 billion, when I told them what my price was going to be, they said, oh, can you do something about price? And I said, well, yeah, I can put it up if you want. And they were like, no, you idiot. And so, well, why would I put it down? You are a bank to start with. This thing's worth £2.5 billion. My price is not even a gnat on the windscreen of this. You probably spend more on flowers in reception. I don't understand why you question. And they said, but if we win, we're going to be paying you quite a lot of money for not very many days' work. And I said, do you want me to take longer? I just don't understand your point. You're going to have £2.5 billion, not very many. Why are we even... And so, if I didn't have those scripts in my Marcus, I wouldn't have got the work and they might not have won the deal. So, it's in your customer's interest to be good at this stuff as well. So, here we go with a couple of scripts for you. Let's say someone says... they ring up and they say, how much are you? That's one of the first questions. So they want to know about fees too early. This is what I do. I'll tell you what my script is, then I'll break it down for you. So if someone gets in contact with me and says, Andy, we're thinking of hiring you for our conference. We're just doing a bit of a ring round to see what speaker fees are, and then we're going to do a shortlist. And if you're on that, so what's your speaker fee? Well, I don't want to talk about my speaker fee yet. I want to talk about it after. So if they say, what's your speaker fee? I always say, oh, I don't know, Marcus. Because it depends what you want me to do, and I don't want you to pay for things that you don't need. So do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions about your conference, and then I'll be able to confirm what the fee is? Now, I think that's a really good answer, because you cannot say, oh, it's all right, I'll pay for something I don't need. Do you know? And so the way to break it down, if you think of my script, the beginning, the middle, and the end, the beginning is very assertive. You said to me, Andy, what's your speaker fee? And I went assertively, I don't know. Or I could have said, it depends. It's like 2 or 3 words, and it just goes, I'm in charge now. So if somebody says, that's very expensive, Will, I might go, really? Do you see what I mean? So you just want hardly any words, just to... And the middle is persuasive. So if the opening is assertive, the middle is persuasive. I don't know exactly what you want me to do, and I don't want to pay for things you don't need. That's pretty persuasive. And the final thing, Marcus, and I haven't met anybody else who teaches this. So either... I'm the only one who's right, or I'm the only one who's wrong. But you always want to end your answer with a question. So if you notice, I said, do you mind if I ask you a couple of questions, and then I'll be able to confirm the price? And the reason I end with a question is objections can be quite nerve-wracking, and silence can be quite nerve-wracking. So if there's a bit of silence after a question, that's fine, because it's your turn to speak next. But if I've just made a statement and there's silence, I might cave in. Yeah? So assertive, persuasive, and with a question. I'll give you one more example, and please edit this out if you think, shut up, Andy. Let's say someone says, Andy, can I have a discount? I'm going to go assertive. I'm going to say, oh, we don't do those? Pretty assertive. And then the middle is persuasive. I say, because it wouldn't be fair on my existing customers who pay those rates. It's pretty persuasive, right? And then I end with a question and say, if you want to pay less, that's fine. Let's look at how we can reduce the scope. But if you want everything that we talked about, it would have to be the price I've quoted. Which do you want to do? And what I love about it, you just have total control. Total control over that. And anyone who's hearing this, I once heard someone say, Marcus, when they heard my scripts, they're like, oh, it's all right for you. I said, well, I wasn't born with this. Like sometimes people say, oh, salespeople, are they born or are they made? They're made. Like, I'll tell you something that never happens, Marcus, in a maternity ward in a hospital or something, and the midwife comes to the proud parents and says, oh, look, you've had a little salesperson. It doesn't happen. Salespeople aren't born, they're made. So what I did is I worked out how to go up with scripts, assertive, persuasive, and end with a question. I thought of all the objections I might have, and then I came up with a script, assertive, persuasive, and end with a question, and then I just drove around out the car park 300 times, saying them again and again until I got really good at them. And there is no shortcut to that. So anyone listening to that who thinks, brilliant, that sounds easy, it probably took me half an hour a day for about 3 weeks.
I'd worry about what they were getting for the fee if you crumbled to give them a discount in the first instance, and then you're going to go and tell their sales team.
Well, it would be a bit ironic, wouldn't it? Yeah, I remember once there was a different bank that wanted us to, they had one of these little portal things, and stupid procurement people at this, procurement people are glorious people, but not at this bank. And what they did is they had a little portal, and they said, what we're going to do is, to be on our preferred supplier list, we are going to put your price on the portal with a green, an amber, or a red thing next to it. So I think we were pitching for 3 or 4 pieces of work. So they said, we're going to put a colour next to it, and you got 1 hour, and you won't be on our preferred supplier list unless your thing goes green. So I thought that was a sort of bullying the supplier, really. So what they did is they said, this is what you're going to do. So when it came up, we'd gone for these things, and they were all red, and there was one amber. So you know what the game is, right? You've got 1 hour, you're not going to do anything for 50 minutes, then you're going to start reducing your price until it goes green. Well, I refused to do this, Will, so I said to all my team, right, pub, all of you, no one is allowed to look at this website. Anyone who looks at the website is gross misconduct, and I'm going to beat you up. Here we go, to the pub. And we did what you would call a good meal for February, chips and wine. And then at the end, we just didn't look at the website at all. And the next day, they rung up and said, a similar point to what you just said, you're the only one who didn't do that. And why didn't you do it? I said, anyone who wants to teach your colleagues how to sell more, I would be astounded if they drop their price, because that will show they don't practice what you want them to preach to your colleagues. Clearly, we're not going to be the right partner, because I think you want your salespeople to sell in a way that it contradicts how you want the bank to buy. So I just don't think we're going to be good partners for this. Well, guess what, Will? We won the work, and they said, if you could teach our colleagues to be like that. And so you're right. So I didn't expect to win the work, but I refused to play that game.
We talk about that, the idea of coming from a place of abundance as well. I think we've got people who are right at the most experienced point, those people who are starting off, and it's really easy in the early stages to come across as desperate. You know, if you want to win something, you know, you'll do anything by hook or by crook. You'll get people in through pricing reductions or whatever else it is. But it's good to hear that point of almost not needing to win the business to stay afloat actually makes you come across that little bit more confident and have that more conviction.
It does, but it is easier now that I don't need to work. It wasn't very easy when I needed to eat. So what I would suggest, because again, someone might listen to this and go, I get that, but I bet you didn't do it to start with. What I did to start with, Will, is I would never discount. I once heard someone say, if you discount your price, you discount your brand. So if I say, I remember getting in a taxi once and I said, what's the flat fee to go to Ormskirk? And this guy said, 25 quid. And to be honest, I'm doing it at a loss then. I said, I can't afford it. He goes, right, 20. Really? So you're 25, you were taking the mickey, right? So what I would do to start with is, let's say I'd said the price was 25 and they say, I can only give you 20. I would never say, all right then, because then it sounds like you were taking the mickey with 25. So I would say, okay, the only way that we can consider dropping the price is if you do two things instead. So you won't give me money, but you'll give me something else. And when I was starting, I was saying the two things I want are, number one, a written testimonial, if you like the work. And number two, a personal introduction to at least 2 or 3 people who might buy from me. So that's the deal. If I'm going to take £5 off my taxi fare, you're going to give me a testimonial and 2 or 3 referrals. That's the deal. And if they say no, I'll say, well, I'm not interested then. So even if you're hearing this and think it's all right for you, Andy, you don't need to discount, I do. I strongly suggest you don't just discount money, because otherwise you sound like that desperate taxi driver. What you do is say, I can drop, but only if you do this instead. And actually, when I started out, that was better. Yes, I lost £5, but I got 3 referrals and a testimonial. That's worth more than £5.
Makes sense. One of the things that I read a book a while ago called The Challenger Sale, and it was all about how you put your clients under the right amount of pressure. And I think we've obviously spoken about objections, but the biggest thing that we hear in our industry is about inertia. People are stuck in the ways, and it's not really an objection verbally. But how do you find the challenger aspect of your teaching? How does that land with and resonate with other people?
Yeah, The Challenger Sale by Dixon Adamson. It's a really good book. I found it's quite academic because it's so much research in it. So some people love stuff like that, and some people, you might need a few cups of tea to get through it, but it's worth reading. But if you don't want to read the book at all, just remember the word teaching. What it means by the Challenger Sale, challenge their thinking, teach them something, is basically what it says. A bit more to it than that. It's like 300 pages of brilliance, but it's basically teach people things, prompt their thinking, challenge their thinking. And so there's a couple of things with that, really. One of them is that make sure you always teach the client something they didn't know. That's really important. That's what challenge their thinking is. So, they use the phrase, don't they, about positive tension. A relationship builder doesn't want to disagree with the client at all. Yeah? Whereas a challenger goes in and says, have you thought about it from this point of view? So before every sales meeting I have, and before every sales meeting that anyone listening to this I suggest you have, is do a little bit of research. Just 1 or 2 minutes is fine. Just find something that you know that they don't. Yeah? And let's face it, I'm not about your products or service, just something that's happening in the market. Yeah. So, for example, I heard the other day, this is good if you sell pensions, that of all the 80-year-olds who ever lived, so the history of human race, right, Of all the people who've reached the age of 80, over half of them are alive now. That is a stat. I love that. And then it's one of those, you both nod, it's really interesting, but the more you think about it, you think, well, hold on. All right, so that has a big impact if you're talking about pensions. That has a big impact for like wealth creation. It has a big impact for all this stuff. And also it's just interesting, right? So if you're talking to IFAs and you and were to say that and they didn't know it, they will do the face that you do, Will, where you're going, oh, all right. That's what I mean by teaching. So you're not teaching about our pension has bells and whistles. You're saying, did you know this about the world? So I said two things. Firstly, make sure you've got a great stat or something that people will look at you and go, I never knew that. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, if people are stuck in their ways, what you want to do is you want to ask a question with a negative word in it. So this is quite advanced. So if you say to someone, so should we progress then? That's positive. Shall we progress? They might say no. They won't say no, I'm stuck in my ways. They'll say, I'll think about it, or I'll get back to you, or I've got a lot of things on at the minute, or maybe leave it with me. But if you ask a question with a negative word in it, you might say something like this. So based on what we talked about so far, are there any reasons why we shouldn't explore this a bit more? So shouldn't is a negative word. Or I might say, would it do any harm if we explored this a bit more? Now, the great thing about asking a negative word is this. So you teach them something about, do you know all the 80-year-olds are still like whatever it is? And then later on you say, is there any reason why we shouldn't look into this anymore? If someone says no, that means there's no reason we shouldn't. That's the double negative. All right? So if I say to you, well, have you got any concerns about this? And you go, no. I can go, brilliant, let's get going. If you say, have you got any concerns about this? And you go, yes, I have. I can say, oh, why is that? What are you concerned about? You'll tell me your objection, and then it's just objection handling. So the best way to break inertia is to say something with a negative word in it, because sometimes people will say no, not because they've thought it through and think no. They just say no because it's easier to say no. So if you ask a question where a no becomes a yes, that's totally different. So my daughter, we call her Child 1, because we don't give our kids names. She had an interview a couple of years ago, and she was saying, what's your top tip for interviewing? And I said this one. Like use a negative word at the end. And so at the end of the interview, they said to her, okay, this is all very impressive and so on. We'll give it some thought. We'll get back to you. Have you got any final questions? And she said, well, just got one really. I just wonder if you have any reservations about hiring me. So this is why I hated her teenage years. So have you got any reservations about hiring me? Reservations are a negative word. The only answers that are, no, we haven't, or yes, we have. Have you got any reservations about hiring? And they said, oh, that's a good question. Yeah, we got one actually. And she goes, oh, I'm glad I asked, what is it? And they said, well, we're just not quite sure you're experienced enough. And she said, well, I think I am. Do you mind if I tell you why I think I am and we can have a chat about it? Anyway, she got the job. And they said to her afterwards, if you hadn't asked that question, you wouldn't have got the job. Because what would have happened is we would have said, that's really good. She's really good, she is. I don't think she's quite experienced enough. Yeah, she was good though, and she wouldn't get the job. But she brought it out with that thing. So the challenger sale, the way you stop people who are stuck in the ways, number one, teach them something. So they go, I didn't know that. And secondly, ask a question with a negative word. Any reservations? Any reasons we shouldn't do this? Have you got any concerns about this? What harm would it do if you shared this with your clients? That's a great way to do, because that way the word no becomes a yes.
It's really interesting, the inertia stuff, Andy. It's something we see really quite commonly in our industry. You may have an advisor who's used a particular investment range for a long period of time, and you're shifting the mentality there. For those ones who are stuck in inertia, you've perhaps had a couple of meetings afterwards, you've contacted them, you've spoke to them on the phone. Is there a point where you just kind of draw a line in the sand and think, right, our efforts are finished here. When are we moving on? Are there any kind of key indicators for when you would likely do that?
Oh God, yeah, definitely. So a couple of things. The first thing is, it is absolutely not a failure if you decide not to pursue it. In fact, I think it's a success. So when I said before about what you want is success and speed and smiling, yeah, that's what you want. So if you're flogging a dead horse, maybe you'll be successful in, but it's not speedy and it's not smiling. If you're another S, self-esteem, after a bit you begin to feel pretty down, yeah. So I have a simple rule that if it goes beyond 3, I'm probably going to stop. So let's say we're having a lovely chat and you seem interested. I've done all me thing. Any reasons why we shouldn't do this? Any reservation? You go, no, Andy, it's all good. And I'll send you an email, but you don't reply. You ghost me. And then we had a call scheduled in for Friday and you don't turn up to it. So that's 2 strikes. I'm not going to let you have 3. So what I'll do is I'll probably send you a note, and it's all very charming, it's very factual, and it says something like this. Marcus, can I ask your advice about something? I'm conscious that you didn't reply to my email last week, and you didn't turn up to the meeting we agreed. So that's factual. I'm not having a go here, but I'm just saying this fact. So I'm conscious I want to be a proactive partner for you, but I don't want to be irritating. So what I'm going to do is I won't contact you again, but if you are interested, you know where I am. See ya! Alright, so it's like, basically the email is a polite way of saying, I'm not playing this anymore. That abundance thing you said, well, I'm very happy to be abundant. I mean, this recording now, it's all abundance and lovely, and I'm very happy to do it. But I'm not going to abundantly give my time to Marcus if he's not replying to me, because then I'm just like, it's just not good for success, speed, smiling, or self-esteem. So my personal rule, Marcus, is I've got 3 strikes, and the third one is very much I'm out of here. Sometimes I put a bit of humour into it. I'll say something like, if you're interested, let me know. If not, don't worry, I'll just slip silently away into the night. ... or something like that, and you both smile, like you get to smile. And sometimes what happens is people will come back to me and say, oh, sorry, I've been really busy. Sometimes they don't reply. I don't care either way. I remember my mum used to work for an organisation that helps people with marriage and relationship counselling. And I'm sure it's very equal opportunities now, but in the day, they used to have some forms that she couldn't complete because they weren't completable by someone who was blind. So I would help her with that. And there was a question on the form which said, did your counselling allow the couple to stay together easier or separate with less hostility? And I remember that phrase, separate with less hostility, because I said to my mum, is that something that you aim for? And she said, our job of counselling is not to keep people together. Our job of counselling is to help people see where this is going to end and get there as nicely as you can. So if it's going to end with splitting up, then success means you separate with less hostility. So that's a good thing. And I think sales is the same way. Like, hopefully we'll work together, but if not, let's just separate with no hostility at all. But what we're not going to do is I'm going to email you every week for the rest of my life thinking, I hate myself. So I feel quite strongly about that, Marcus. I think salespeople don't help their self-esteem by flogging a dead horse. It's just not good for you.
It makes sense. And as part of those negotiations, where does empathy play a role in that?
Oh, total. So you want to say, you want to put yourself in the other person's shoes and be appropriate with these things, but also do it in a way which is appropriate. Well, you don't want to go too far the other way. You only see things from their point of view because you've got your point of view as well. I mean, if you think of sales in a very simple way of being 2 circles, a big circle and a small circle, if a client's going to work with you, they're going to pay you some fees, and that's a small circle. And what they'll do is they'll get lots of afters, lots of value from you, which is a big circle. Yeah? So really, empathy, you want to find the afters they want, you want to empathise, you want to see their point of view, because they've got a lot of value that you can give them. You know, you're going to help them retire early with more money in their pocket and look after their family. That's a lot of value. Yeah, there's going to be a few fees involved, but it's tiny compared to this. So you want empathy, you want to understand the value of the afters, but it's also, don't give it all to them, because you need to get your fees as well. And I always think that you've got your fees right if you think it's fair and they think it's fair. So if you think I've put in quite a lot of work here and I've been paid fairly for that, and the customer thinks, well, I've got a pretty good return on my investment here and that's fair, then that's fine.
What sort of advice, Andy, would you give to sales professionals who feel kind of maybe stuck in their career? Sales can be quite a lonely place, particularly field sales. If you're out in the field, working from home, looking after a patch, you want to kind of elevate yourself more. Do you think kind of mentorship and teamwork is kind of a big area to kind of play on as part of that to move yourself forward?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, with any question at all, so I'll use this as an example, but anytime there's a challenging question, and there's so many people in the field who are lonely, and it is a bit, here we go again. If you look at some of the most successful salespeople, they have this natural optimism, they have this perseverance, they can persevere, and resilience, they keep going. But you need a sense of optimism, and also you need a sense of happiness, I think, sometimes, because sometimes I've had a belting year, but then it just goes back to zero. And you think, here we go again. So you need to keep going. So there's a lot of stuff you need. So my solution to any challenge like that, any challenge at all, Marcus, is what I do is this is what I call a cup of tea exercise. I get myself a cup of tea, and it only takes 1 cup of tea. By the time I finish my cup of tea, I've done it. And what I do is I list all the options I have for solving this challenge. So you said mentorship, finding a team, checking in with my boss every now and again, finding a colleague who I can talk to every now and again, listening to a podcast of someone that I like. So you just list them all. So you get a piece of paper and you list them all down in the left-hand column, right? And you want at least 3 or 4 ideas. And when I say 3 or 4, I really mean 10, Marcus. Just think of all the things you could do. So you gave 2 ideas. I've given 2 or 3 more. Everyone's cleverer than me. They could come up with 10 without trying very hard. Takes a cup of tea. When you've done that, what I suggest you do, if you like my 3 S's about sales and speed and smiling, what I suggest you do is you do 3 columns, sales, success and smiling. And for each of the options you've come up with, you ask yourself, is that going to help me from a sales point of view, from a success point of view, and a smiling point of view? And that one, is it? And so it's almost like tick, half, or cross. So a mentor, for example, probably will help me with sales, probably. Speed, half, because I do have to invest a bit of time with them. Smiling, big tick, that will really help me. Having an update meeting with a sales manager where they go through line by line, it might help with sales, but it's a real drag of my time and I hate it. So all you do is you list as many ideas as you can and then you just grade each one. And the thing you want to do, Marcus, because everyone's different, the thing each of us want to do are the things where you have 3 ticks. Yeah? So for me, the thing that I find works really well is I have a colleague called Emma, my PA, who is amazing and I love her to bits and she's fab. And we have got a thing that if ever I win a piece of work or I have a good meeting, I can ring her, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. And sometimes she'll say, right, talk, because I just need to get it out, you know. And sometimes she'll say, tell me more, and I go, and then this happened then. And sometimes she'll say, brilliant, are we done? And I go, yeah, we're done, thanks. And so it just breaks that, because sometimes excitement, you want to share it, right? So when I did that, I promise you the top line was not, ring up Emma and have a rant at her. That was like option number 10 at the bottom of my cup of tea. So sometimes you need to dredge your brains to come up with ideas. But that's a pretty good rule for life. If you want to, you said before about, well, if you're about how to prospect, same thing, get yourself a cup of tea, list 10 different ways you can prospect, and then just look which is most likely to be successful, and be speedy, and be smiling, and you might well find cold calling is 3 crosses, whereas asking for referrals is 3 ticks. Well, that tells you what to do, and it tells you what not to do.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, one of the reasons why we started the Trusted community in the first place really was to bring like-minded people together who possibly don't have that social olive branch that they can lean on. And I think that, as Marcus said, you know, this is at times a very lonely place. And the thing that really kind of sparked it in the first place was going to conferences and being on a stand next to a competitor and realising you'd be better off mates as enemies, and therefore you have that olive branch in order to kind of lean onto. But just from a personal point, Andy, how do you as an individual, how do you stay inspired? What is it that gets you out of bed in the morning to go out and continue to help people get better and better and better?
Well, it helps that I love what I do. I love everything about it. And the thing I love most is my customers and the afters they get. So I'm not saying this in a cheesy way. I'm absolutely buzzing. So when the bank rung me to tell me they won that deal, it was amazing. Just before this call, I had a WhatsApp from one of my customers, which I'm going to read out to you because I was really pleased. And he said, this guy had helped, let's call him Mr. X. He said, Neil won the retender you helped with a 96% score. So I'm absolutely made up for them. Like, Neil's a top guy. Mr. X. Sorry, that's giving that away. So what's happened is I just love things like that. It really buzzes me. So I love it when my customers succeed. It makes me feel really good. I find my topic really interesting. I don't know if it's because of my mum or because of whatever. I just think it's really interesting. And what I'll do is I will always work on things that help me be good at all those 3 S's. I think too many salespeople think sales is good, everything else is not good. I think you need all 3. You need sales and speed and smiling. Yeah. So what gives me all those? Learning from other people. I'm very lucky because if you speak at conferences, that means there are other conference speakers, and conference speakers are at the top of their game. So anytime I'm at a conference, I always get there early and leave late so I can hear all the other experts. I like looking at TED Talks. I like reading books. I like going on my bike and listening to podcasts and so on. So I just really enjoy it. I'd like to say something really more clever than that, but I just really enjoy it. So you find the thing that floats your boat. I think sales is providing even more afters to even more people. That's what I think sales is. And you think, so I focus on the big circle. So I'm going to provide even more afters to even more people. Now, clearly, if I get paid fairly, I'm going to do all right out of it. But that's not my drive. I'm not interested in sales targets. I'm interested in my customers' targets. Yeah. So when we have meetings as a company, we say, what else can we do to help so-and-so win more sales? We're just totally focused on their happiness and their future. So that's what floats my boat more than anything.
It's been really evident from the chat today, Andy, that your mum's been a kind of huge mentor in your life. Has there been anyone else who's kind of provided great value through your working career and speaking?
Yeah, I mean, equally to mum is me dad. So sorry, Dad, if you happen to listen to this. So yeah, my parents, I talk to them a lot. My dad used to work in local government. He was chief executive of Liverpool City Council, so we had 21,000 people working. So like, he's super bright as well. So my parents definitely. I mentioned before Drayton Bird, the marketing guy. He was just life-changing for me at the time. Great guy, very funny. I remember just walking around with him once around Albert Dock in Liverpool and just listening to him tell me stories about how he met Ian Fleming and how he met David Ogilvy, and how I was pleased I started working with a financial services company. He said, I remember when they founded because I was at the lunch with, he's just so anything I've done, he's just done it a million times over. So that was really interesting. And he taught me a couple of things. First, he said, work on sales, like I said. The other thing is, he said, how much are you thinking of charging? And I said, I don't know, like 100 quid, 200 quid. I've seen some people are 300. So if I go 100 or 200, and he was the one, and he just stopped me and he said, what's the most expensive rate you ever heard somebody charge? And I went, 4,000. He said, right, I suggest you start with 6,000 and we'll work down from there. I went, what? And he said, you know things that other people don't. And this was like it because he knows stuff, this guy, right? He's really academic as well as being brilliant. He's done marketing for people like Virgin Wines and Peppa Pig and Boeing. He said, you know things that people don't. He said, the stuff you taught me in 10 minutes, I've never heard this before in my life. He said, you have no idea how unusual your knowledge is and how useful it's going to be. Why you charge 100 quid when some muppet is charging £4,000, I've no idea. And so that just changed my thoughts. So I didn't have the guts to go to 6,000. I did go to 2,000 though to start with. That was my day rate to start with, because he'd said 6, I went for 2, but I was going to go for 100 quid. So, and then what happened was I helped a customer win a piece of work and they got millions from it, and I'd done half a day's trade, so I got £1,000 and they got millions. And then I thought, hold on, that's not fair. My circle's too small. So that's when my price started going up, because I realised the value of the circle. I wasn't charging enough. So my mum, my dad, Drayton Bird, and the organisation was BNI. So when I went to BNI to start with, that was just, so Business Network International, I just loved that to bits. And I went there and I just saw all these people who, a lot of business owners, a lot of people who were trying to make their way in sales. And the main thing I thought of the room was they were lovely people and they were sort of searching. They'd set up on their own, but it wasn't as easy as they thought. They were a franchisee and they had all the kit, but they weren't. So I set up on my own and it wasn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. And I was surrounded by these positive people who just wanted success for themselves and everyone who was around them. So my mum, my dad, Drayton and BNI. There you go. And you too.
Of course. Well, for our penultimate question, I wanted to give you a double-sided one. What's the best piece of advice that you've heard from a sales point of view, and what's the worst?
The worst is the customer's always right. I don't agree with that at all. My customers are really, really clever people, but they have no idea what's going on inside my head, and they've no idea how I can best help them. So I've had people sometimes ring me up and say, Andy, we need a 2-day residential course on something. I think, like, what? How do you know 2 days? Like, how do you know how fast I talk? Why does it have to be residential? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me at all. So it's like that Henry Ford quote about, if I'd done what my customers wanted, I would have built a faster horse. Yeah? I mean, customers are brilliant things. I mean, you can tell pretty much every sentence I said how much I love my customers, right? I love my customers, but it doesn't mean they're always right. So I think that's not quite right. As far as the best piece of advice, that thing that Drayton said was life-changing for me. If you can provide value that other people can't, focus on the value. Don't focus on your own feelings of your own worth. So I looked around, saw everybody else was charging 200, so I'll charge 100. Like, no. What you do is you think, I'm bringing value here that's worth millions, so I think I can charge a few thousand. That's fair. So I think that's best value. So, I mean, I've managed to work that out for something that works. So another thing I find that I don't really like charging by time. I just don't do it. So if somebody says, what's your day rate? I don't have day rates. If I'm talking to a customer and we're going to work on something that's going to worth £5 million to them and they pay me, I don't know, 50 grand, it almost doesn't matter whether it's 1 day work or 1 month work. If they pay me 50 and they get 5 million, then everyone's happy. So I'm not too worried about time. So that advice has sort of come from someone, but I've sort of like fine-tuned it myself. So best advice is going to be work what you're worth out compared to the afters you give, rather than just thinking it should be X pounds per hour. That's the best advice. The worst advice, the customer's not always right, even if you love him.
Well, it's over to the last one, and then we're good to go.
Go on.
All we're after here, Andy, obviously the trusted audience will be kind of listening to this. One key powerful takeaway that you want to pass on to those guys.
Ask questions to find the customer's afters. That's the best one. Ask questions to find the customer. The best salespeople ask the best questions. Yeah, and the best salespeople focus on the future good of the customer. So when you're investing time in scripts and practicing your objections, also scripts and practice some questions as well. If you ask really good questions, Marcus, you will find out the afters. So you'll find out the big circle they want. And when you've done that, then all the other stuff we said about storytelling and objection handling, all that comes into play, but without knowing where they want to be. So the obvious thing there is you ask a question like, what are your goals for the year and what are your financial goals and all that stuff. Everyone's heard, what keeps you awake at night? I mean, we've all heard stuff like that. But saying things like, of all your friends, who do you know who's retired really well? So is that the sort of retirement that you want then? Is that the sort of retirement you are going to get? And how young do you want to be when that kicks in? I mean, these are questions most people don't ask, but they're really good questions. Yeah? So just invest more time than you have done coming up with really good questions to find the after someone wants. Because if you get that right, I'm not saying sales is easy, but sales is 1,000 times easier if you know the happy place they want to get to.
Well, Andy, thank you for your time. It's been absolutely brilliant. There are some fantastic nuggets of information in there.
No, I've really enjoyed it. That's been great. Thanks, guys.